Hello and welcome back to the Multiplatform Modding with Architecture in Minecraft series. And after we've added block drops with tags for the block mining levels and tool types in the last episode, today we're going to add the exactly opposite of that, and that is tools that are able to break those blocks. And to an extent also swords, because swords and tools are nearly identical in the game. I'll be only showing you how to add a pickaxe, but I also show you which other things you need to add the other tools as well, because that's pretty much a repetitive process, and so I will only show that for one item. Now the first thing we need is our tool's material, in our case the ruby, which we've used in the past. But to tell the game that this ruby actually belongs to our tool material, the first thing we need is to create a tag. With that we can tag our ruby items so that the game knows it is associated with the tool material. So let's start with that, and for this I'm going to create a new package, call it tags. And in this package a new class, and we call that tutorial mod tags. And in this class we're now going to define our tag. And our tag definition looks like this. Let me import all the things. We want an item, we need a tag key, we need the item registry, and the resource location, and of course our mod main class. So what we do here is we create a new tag key for items, and this is later important where we need to place the JSON file to add our items to this key. In this case it's an item key, so we need to place it later in the item directory. We call it Ruby tool materials, and simply with tag key.create we can create a new tag key for the item registry, as we said in the beginning right here also. And then we need to define the resource location where this JSON file, which later defines which items are inside of this tag, needs to be located. In our case, in our mod namespace, so our mod ID in the front, and then it is the ruby underscore tool underscore materials file, which we will create later, and this is the name we need to remember for this. So with that, we have our tool material. Next, we're going to create in our items package our tool material class. We call it tutorial mod tool materials. And here we create a public static final tool material. And we call this ruby. And we create a new tool material. And now I'm going to put the parameters in different lines so that I can explain a little bit more about them and it doesn't look so crowded in this one line. So the first parameter this tool material constructor needs is the block tag that defines which blocks should not drop when used this tool. And since I want our Ruby tools to be on the same mining level as regular diamond tools, we're going to use the block tags dot and then incorrect for diamond tool. So the incorrect for something tool tags essentially contain all the blocks that need to be mined by a better tool than this level. So every block that is tagged with this block tag can only be mined by tools that are better than diamond tools, so in Vanilla's case just netherite. We could also use the requires tags, but the problem is the requires tags only contain the blocks that exactly match this tool type. So if we, for example, would say here require stone tool, only blocks that can be broken by a stone tool could be mined, but not blocks that could be broken by an iron tool, for example. So that's the reason why we use this incorrect text, because the other texts where the blocks actually get added are then computed into those incorrect tags while the game runs, which makes it a lot easier since we don't need to add blocks to multiple tags or tools to multiple tags. The second parameter we need here is not the mining level, it's the durability. I choose 1024, that's slightly less than diamond, and that's going to be a pattern I'm going here with a slightly worse version of a diamond tool, essentially. The next thing is the speed. With that, the tool mines. Diamond has an 8 speed, we'll use a 7 speed. The next is the attack damage, the base attack damage. That is then modified for each individual tool. So when we create later the tools, we modify the speed and attack damage with modifiers, and those essentially then are computed in the game to the final values. And the next thing is the enchantability, which tells the game how good enchantments get when this item is put in an enchantment table. Diamond has 10, will go slightly better than Diamond actually with 12. And the last thing we need is the tag that defines the materials that fall within our tool material here, and that is tutorial.tags.rubytoolmaterials. And with that, we have our tool material. Next step, we want to actually add our items. So for this, we go into our items, and we're going to create a public static registry supplier item for Ruby pickaxe, since that's what we want to add. And then we go here and say Ruby pickaxe equals register item Ruby underscore pickaxe, and then again with the lambda notation our supplier. And now we want to create a new pickaxe item. And this is the point where essentially the only difference or the only real difference between the tools is. So for a pickaxe item, you choose pickaxe item. If you want a hoe item, you use hoe item. An axe item is axe item, shovel item is shovel item. Shears are theoretically also possible, and a sword is a sword item. And all those base tools, so shovel, hoe, pickaxe, axe, and sword, share the same parameters in the constructor and work in essentially the same way. But in this case, we just focus on the pickaxe item, and now the pickaxe item requires 4 things. The first thing is our tool material, that is our tutorial mod tool materials .ruby. Next, attack damage and attack speed. As I mentioned before, these are the modifiers that are put together with the base values of the tool material and the base values of the game to then compute the final attack damage and attack speed when a player uses this tool. In this case, I'll go with 4.5 and minus 2.5, which again is slightly better than Diamond in a speed sense and slightly worse than Diamond in a damage sense. But I mean, essentially this is a pickaxe, so we don't want to use that to hit on enemies, but to mine blocks. And for this, these two things are not really important. Those are just for damage. And last but not least, we need our properties, again base properties, and then we also set a creative tab, just as with every other item. So if you wanted to add a shovel as well, you just use the exact same thing, replace the item things, the item names, and then say instead of pickaxe item, a shovel item, and then you can adjust attack speed and attack damage as you desire. With that, everything we need to do in Java is done. We have added our key, we have added our material, and then we've registered our item. But again, we now need to do essentially first the same things we need when adding any item. So let's start in our assets with our language. So let's give this Ruby pickaxe a name. That is item.tutorial_mod.ruby_pickaxe is a Ruby pickaxe. That's the name, as you've already seen before with the other items. Then we go to textures item and add our Ruby pickaxe. Again, a recolor diamond pickaxe for a Ruby pickaxe. In items folder here, we also need to add our Ruby pickaxe. And this file is essentially the same as for every other item. So the Ruby just the different model down here. And speaking of model, that's the last thing we need. We need our model in our models item folder. And now this file is a little bit different because for the Ruby, we used Minecraft item/generated up here. And for the pickaxe, we now use item/handheld. That essentially dictates how the item is rendered when held in the player's hand. And handheld is the way a tool is displayed in the game when held by a player, so it sticks out and is not flat. Yeah, that's the asset part. And the last thing is we need to add the Ruby to the tag we created so that it can repair our pickaxe. And for this, we're going to the data folder, to our tutorial mod namespace here, and create a new directory here, and that is tags/item. And in this item, we now create the file that we've specified earlier when we created our tag. In our case, that is ruby_tool_materials.json. And similar to the tags we used last time for blocks, we need to put in a similar block. Just this time we want to add the value tutorial_mod Ruby to this tag, so that all the items in here, in our case just the Ruby, are tagged with the tag and thus can repair our pickaxe. So let's jump in the game and see how it looks. Yeah, so welcome to the game. As you can see, I have a Ruby pickaxe and I have placed an anvil down to show you how to repair it later. And now let's see if it can mine blocks. And as you can see, we can mine our Ruby ore and it drops Ruby. And it drops rubies, and as you can see, the pickaxe loses durability. And if we enable advanced tooltips, we can also see the 1024 durability, and we also see the modifiers we put in when creating our tool material and our item. And if we mine this Ruby here and then head to the anvil, you can also see that if we place the Ruby pickaxe down here and add in Ruby here, we can repair our Ruby pickaxe. And with that, we've added, in this case, just a pickaxe, but as I explained, it's a similar process also for swords, for shovels, etc. In the next episode, we're going to add armor, and with that, pretty much all of the basic things are finished, and then I'll talk about some more advanced things, for example, like a block that can store items like a chest, for example. See you then, goodbye.